Hi everybody, thank you for joining us this evening. I have with me here Gayle Hulme, who runs British Sovereigns and Royals, and we wanted to just take a moment with you this evening to talk about and commemorate and remember Prince Philip, who unfortunately passed away yesterday at the age of 99. He will leave a massive hole in the royal family, and I think everyone particularly empathises with Her Majesty the Queen for having him at her side for in excess of 3/4 of a century, really, married for 73 years and having known him for a while before that is indescribable. I would have thought how she must be feeling right now. But we've seen lots of wonderful outpourings of just wonderful memories and sort of people talking about how they have a lot of respect for him and they hope that he rests in peace. And it's been really nice to see people sort of coming together in communities like that and to sort of celebrate his memory and remember him and talk about who he was and the legacy really that he's left in terms of things like the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme and the multiple charities that he represented and worked for over the years. Now, slightly ashamedly, my knowledge of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, is a little bit scanty, to say the least. This is why I have Gayle here, because she just is the person, the oracle, really, for the modern royal family. So I've asked Gayle here to talk today because she is a real authority on Prince Philip and Her Majesty the Queen. So we have a few things that we talked about that we were going to cover. Now, I found out today, so I hope this is correct, otherwise I'm going to look like a fool, but actually he wasn't just the Duke of Edinburgh, he was also the Earl of Meredith and Baron Greenwich. Is that right? So I did not know that until today. So it's one of those little details of all these things that we don't find out about. Yeah, and to get to almost 100, so short of his birthday, absolute changes somebody must see in that time span is incredible. So let us start from the beginning. Where was he born? When was he born? And a little bit about his family, because there was a little bit of controversy about his family, wasn't there, when he married Elizabeth? But yes, when and where was he born exactly?
So Prince Philip was born as a prince of Greece, although he wasn't actually Greek in any way, shape, or form. He was actually Danish, but his grandfather was relieved of his crown, shall we say. And so the family escaped to Greece, and Philip was born in Corfu.
Oh, wow.
And he was the youngest child of Princess Alice. Princess Alice, who was the granddaughter of who was a great grandchild of Queen Victoria.
Okay.
Yep. And so that was 10th of June 1921 he was born. So he was the only boy. He was the only boy that Andrea and Princess Alice had. So he was very much feted over. They had a very strained marriage. Andrew, he was called Andrea by his family, and Princess Alice. They were also exiled out of Greece. George V had to send a Royal Navy frigate, to actually rescue them from Greece. So when Prince Philip was a baby, the story is that he was packed into an orange crate, and the frigate came and the Royal Navy actually rescued them back to, and they kind of had a bit of a nomadic life after that. Philip's sisters all married German officers who went on to become Nazis, or part of the Nazi party, which was, part of the controversy why they weren't allowed to come to Philip and Elizabeth's wedding.
Yeah.
And so that was his early life. He spent a bit of time in Germany, spent a bit of time in France, and then Lord Mountbatten, who was his mother's brother, kind of took him under his wing.
Yeah.
And he was sent to Gordonston up in the north of Scotland. And Yeah, so that's how he kind of and he ended up in the Royal Navy because of Mountbatten. Mountbatten's father was the first Sea Lord, and Mountbatten was high up in the Navy. And I think it was thought Philip wanted to be in the Air Force, but I think it was thought that there was more social advancement available if you went into the Navy.
Okay.
So let us know how that worked out.
Sea Lord is an amazing title.
Isn't it? Sea Lord. I am the Lord of the sea.
So, how did he meet Her Majesty the Queen? Princess Elizabeth, obviously.
Princess Elizabeth. So she was Princess Elizabeth, and her mother and father, who were George VI and obviously his consort Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, went to Dartmouth, the naval school at Dartmouth. And they took Elizabeth, 13-year-old Elizabeth, and Princess Margaret Rose went on that trip with them. And that was in July 1939. So it was just before the outbreak of the First World War. And there's quite a sweet little anecdote in this book. I don't think I'll be able to just lay my hands on it quite just yet, but we've all got this kind of idea about Prince Philip being this kind of forthright guy and always saying what he really meant and everything. And him and Elizabeth were talking about the mumps, and she was saying how her dad had the mumps when he was at Dartmouth and different things, and you know, and don't worry, it's not contagious and all this sort of stuff. And then he asked her what she wanted to do, and she was like, oh, I don't really know. And this, and he went, should we play croquet? And she was like, oh, well. And he went, yeah, I know, it's a filthy game, but let's play it anyway.
A filthy game. There was me thinking crochet was quite pop crochet.
Yeah,
croquet was quite posh, but
yeah, but you can imagine him. You can imagine him saying that, can't you?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, well, if you like me, love, this is what you're going to get.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, as you said, the outbreak of the Second World War came, and he served in the war, didn't he?
He did. He served. I think he was
an amazing naval career for the period.
Yeah,
he had it.
He was. I think he was first sent to the Pacific. I'm not exactly sure of the ins and outs of it. And then he went to. He was running. I think I seen on the TV earlier on one of the experts saying that he was actually involved. It was Dan Snow. That's who it was. He was saying he was involved in this kind of like, it wasn't glamorous, but this kind of nuts and bolts blockade run up the east coast of England, England and Scotland, the UK, and that was to keep the channel clear to get any supplies that they could back and forward, kind of keep things going. So, and that was quite a precarious sort of thing. I think he definitely served in the Mediterranean as well, and he was mentioned in dispatches because I think it was a dark night, and he was in charge of the floodlights. And what he had done was he had, you know, his commanding officer said, it's your job, Mountbatten, you know, shine the floodlights on the water. And he was very modest. He said that he just happened to shine the light onto this particular German frigate or this German ship, and it illuminated. And of course, that was then the call for the British ships to start firing on it then, which caused, and I think that was part of the reason why they won that battle. It's quite an important battle. So he was involved really at the sticky end. There wasn't any of this, oh, well, you know, he's kind of a royal prince and here he's, you know, kind of a bit friendly with George VI, so we better just, you know, give him a nice cushy number. He really, really was at the forefront of the whole thing. Although when you hear him talking about it, he's very modest and understated about it.
People, you know, we talk about the service he's done to the United Kingdom. I think I did watch a series several years ago now that was on the Windsors and the Mountbatten Windsors. I didn't get to see all of it, but you know, he was advancing very quickly and very well through his naval career, and he was tipped to continue to do extremely well. But obviously Elizabeth became queen probably a lot sooner than a lot of people were expecting, and he had to give that up. He, you know, what he was excelling at and what he really wanted to do, and he just had to sort of stand back and step into the shadows, and that's a big sacrifice. And I think don't look at it like that. You know, what he, and as also as well, he was a sort of strong, proud, clever, successful man, to then at that age give everything up and step into the shadow of somebody else for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think
Pretty selfless
Bar
thing to do.
yeah, I think Barack Obama put it really well in his kind of eulogy that he published yesterday. Was he managed to shine a light without being in the spotlight.
Mm.
And that's probably, I totally agree with you. It must have been, he was only 30 years old when Princess Elizabeth became queen. So for this kind of like strong alpha male who's, you know, I mean, at that point I think he was in charge, he had his own command as HMS Magpie. And he's, you know, a commander of a ship is, you know, you're in charge of everything. The buck stops absolutely with you. You say left, the boat goes left. Sorry for anybody who's a maritime person. I know it's not left and right.
What starboard? That way, that turn the boat that way.
Yeah. Royal history, yes. Maritime,
not so
much.
Yeah.
So to go from that to have, you know, this kind of like you don't have a constitutional role. It's, you know, your wife say all the power. Her Majesty doesn't have any legislative power or anything, but she, you know, he wasn't allowed to, you know, he wasn't going to be seeing government papers, he wasn't going to be given red boxes, he didn't have a constitutional role. And at one point, I think after the whole debacle about his children not being allowed to keep his name, he said, I'm just a bloody amoeba. As he felt like he was just, you know, I'm just here to kind of, you know, be in the background and nobody really is paying any mind to what I'm saying at all.
Yeah.
So I think I think he did have fights in the palace, and I sometimes wonder if that's why he had so much sympathy later on with Diana, Princess of Wales, when she was Princess of Wales, that he tried to help her because he knew the kind of resistance that the system could put up if you were coming in from the outside and were kind of going, well, it's a bit archaic and ridiculous. Like, why are we doing it like this? And then, of course, his son, very different from him, had, you know, lived that existence all his life, so didn't really know any different.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why he had a lot of sympathy for what she was going through and what she was experiencing.
It's strange actually, because this is not the topic for now. But a lot of the time you get people very much that Philip was against Diana from the start. And yeah, that might be a topic for another day, because he's, for someone who's talked about a lot, he's not really talked about very much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Again, possibly because he was sort of sequestered into a corner, but it must have been very frustrating for him. Anyway, dum 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 dum. So the king wasn't massively up for this marriage then?
Well, what had happened was
didn't help.
Yeah, Princess Elizabeth was absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you see pictures of Prince Philip when he was young, you know, he's this tall, blonde, naval, dashing, you know, guy. And she's 13 years old. I mean, I think they were saying like Croffy or Nanny was not Croffy, Ala or Nanny said that she was very, the governess was, she was very, you know, shy and, you know, just that kind of whole teenage thing. So, you know, this guy's 5 years older than her and they're playing this filthy croquet and all this stuff. Totally besotted. Yeah. And our father was, because she corresponded with him by letter all the way through the war. And then when he came back from the war and started to readjust, it was very much like, you know, we're going to be together. And King George was like, you're still a bit young, you're only 20, you know, I'm not sure I want to lose you, yes, because, you know, King George always spoke about the four of us and Elizabeth being his pride and Margaret being his joy, and he didn't have this enormous social circle that, you know, perhaps his brother had and stuff, so it's very much his family unit that he relied on, so he wasn't very keen on breaking that up or anyone else coming in to augment it. So he said to Elizabeth, we're going to go on a tour, all four of us, to South Africa. It's going to be your 21st birthday will be included in that. So if you can wait till we come back from the tour, and then we'll see whether you still feel the same. And there's a story that kind of like, every couple's got our song.
Okay.
And there was a particular song that Philip and her were quite keen on. And apparently on the royal yacht, she played it to death. Her mother and father were like, oh.
The equivalent of like a teenage girl with a radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or a stylus on the 7-inch, just like worn it right out.
And she played this record. I know.
Some things are universal, aren't they? Completely.
Absolutely.
So,
and then of course she came back, and once I think George VI had gone through the kind of ancestry thing of it, because Queen Elizabeth is also a great grandchild of Queen Victoria, and so obviously is Prince Philip. So he wanted to make sure there wasn't going to be any consanguinity. Is that the word? Yeah, he wants to, there wasn't going to be any problems with that. And once he'd satisfied himself that wasn't an issue, then it was kind of like, I think they got engaged in the summer in 1947, and she was pleased as punch. But I think no one was going to talk her out of it. It was always going to be Philip.
She kept biding her time, and she got a man in the end.
She got a man. She's like, sorry, Portia,
So, I believe that, I don't know how many people would have realised it at the time, but the king actually had cancer. Is that correct? And he was trying to hide it, and they would, generally sort of hide it. And you wonder how much maybe even Elizabeth and Margaret knew how unwell he was. The impressions I've got are from things that I don't know how reliable they are as sources, but very much that he sort of kept putting on a brave face and would sort of rally a little bit and then sort of step back, and he'd step back because actually he was quite unwell.
Yeah.
And so he passed away a lot sooner than people would have expected. And
he's seen them off. He's seen them off. And he had a lung removed because he had lung cancer. And then I think they found out that quite soon afterwards that the other lung had the same difficulty, and that there wasn't going to be a happy outcome from it. So I think there was a certain amount of information he did keep to himself. And also, I think you're probably right. That famous scene where he can't go on the Commonwealth tour because he's not well enough. So that's why Elizabeth and Philip go on the tour instead of the king. And you see him at the airport with Princess Margaret and the Queen. And Winston Churchill writes that he actually was fine, and he was really cheery, and he drank a glass of champagne when the aircraft had gone and they went back, and that he was okay. Although with hindsight, we can look back at the pictures and go, well, he looks dreadful. He does look like a man who's not in the best state of health. So, and there wasn't any signs that he was approaching the end of his life. He died in his sleep. There wasn't, that normal kind of thing, somebody's terminally ill and there's a decline and then there's hospitalization there wasn't any of that. He went, I mean, the announcement of his death said that he had spent an enjoyable night with his family the night before. He had gone to bed to his normal rest. I think he had waved to the gardener outside. He was one of the last people to see him. And he went to bed, and then his valet would wake him up in the morning and he was gone. So, yeah, I think he wasn't expected to die. So it was quite a shock for the pair of them.
Mm. Oh, yeah. And then it wasn't just any sort of normal loss of a relative, was it? With it comes all this outstandingly sort of compressed, like you have to do this, you have to do that. I don't know how much in those situations you really get time to mourn, do you?
I don't know. I think this says a lot about George VI's death, says a lot about Philip and Elizabeth at the time, I think, because they come back from treetops and it's kind of breaking on the radios and stuff that George VI has died. And it's this kind of like, we have to tell Princess Elizabeth before she finds out, from some other source. And it's Mike Parker who finds out from her private secretary, Martin Charteris. And Mike Parker tells Philip, this is what's happened. And he says, I'm going to have to be the one to tell her. So he takes her into the garden and the pair of them have a long chat. And you think it's only really a husband and wife who could have that moment. If you know, like, he wants, because he's the person that's closest to her in the world, he wants to be the person who's going to break that news to her, rather than, you know, just a private secretary or an equerry or, you know, some other member of staff. It has to be that relationship. And I think that probably shows the way he thinks about her. That makes sense.
So in a similar vein, there is, I suppose, the way the royal family is viewed externally has changed for a whole manner of reasons. But there comes a time when, you know, you're going to be a father. Obviously, we've had the heir to start with, and we've gone straight in with the man, straight in with the little boy. And, you know, and obviously as a proud man, you know, quite often a man does want a son. And, you know, he became a father to 3 sons and a daughter. Love Princess Anne. And she's great, isn't she? And she just doesn't care.
No.
She just is
whatever.
And but obviously, you know, the dynamics change in any relationship, and when sort of heirs are involved, it becomes a real different set of affairs. So what evidence do we have about the type of father that Philip was to the royal children, bearing in mind obviously that it's not a normal family setup, because it never could be? So
I think there's been a lot of comment over the years about what kind of parents Philip and Elizabeth were to their children. I think from having read different sources, Giles Brandreth, who has written this book, which is, it's not a fluffy book, and Giles Brandreth, it was and continues, or was up until his passing, obviously, still a good friend of Prince Philip's. So I think a lot of what's in that book is probably been pretty accurate. And he asked him the question because before he wrote the book, he said, you know, I'm going to have to ask you these, you know, difficult questions that might be a bit prickly. And one of the questions he asked him was, do you think that yourself and the Queen, you know, were good parents, or you made a good job of it? And he said, well, do you know what? He said, he said, do you know what? He said, we did our best. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of Prince Philip being really good with small children. And Giles Brandreth said that he's seen the Queen and Prince Philip with small children over the years. And small, you know, I mean, I'm not that person, but, you know, there are some people that small children just, you know, they just...
I've got a story actually, literally, about, I didn't know whether or not I would sort of have the opportunity to, this thing is being ridiculous, opportunity to get it in. It just came across something earlier, and now this my phone's going to be an idiot now.
Technology.
So technology is almost a good idea, isn't it? But
yeah, it's working.
We might have to, I'm really annoyed. I'm really annoyed.
Ask me another question while you look for it.
Hang on a second. No, and even though I have actually, I think I've managed to get out of it now. So there's a lady called Lissa I know on Facebook, but there are bits and bats. There's a lovely story of Prince Philip doing something. The child would be too young to remember it. The widow had no power to do anything for the nation, but Philip chose to do something kind for a small child and his grief-stricken family. So the story is about Prince Philip, who died today at 99. The weekend of the Kennedy assassination, he flew to Washington for the funeral. At the White House on Sunday, November the 24th, 1963, Jacqueline Kennedy was looking for John Jr. and opened the door to his playroom. There she found the prince sprawled on the floor, playing and laughing with the murdered president's son. Days from his 3rd birthday, John had said earlier that he didn't have anyone to play with. And also, where's Daddy? I possibly should have issued a Kleenex warning on this one, because I had had one earlier. And Her Majesty's husband decided that he would entertain the boy.
So that's, yeah, clearly bears out what Giles Brandreth and others are saying as well. That
almost, and then later on it says, in May 1965, the British government gave an acre of land to the United States for a memorial to the murdered president at Runnymede site. 750 years earlier, of King John signing the Magna Carta, and here John Jr. was holding hands with his mum and the Prince of, and the Duke of Edinburgh.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's nice.
Yeah.
Oh, God, got me going now as well. Oh.
So yeah, that's like little sort of stories. It was just because you were saying there, sorry, it took me a while to find it, everybody. But as you were saying there, those little stories about him being one of those people that small children gravitate towards, and small children don't care if you're, the Duke of Edinburgh.
No, that's like that. Are you going to spin me around like a helicopter?
Yes. Is there jelly? And will you turn me upside down? These are the priorities of small children.
Absolutely. So
that was like really, really sweet. For parents,
I think,
anyway, let alone with the entire world looking at you.
And as we get older, we've all got these memories and revisionist memories. Oh, when mum did this, or when dad did this, or whoever acted that in that way for you. And then you speak to them, they go, that didn't happen. Yeah. You're like, what, did? So, and I think maybe the most strained relationship he had was with his eldest son, because they said that Prince Philip was very much a pragmatist, but Charles was a romantic. So they weren't always talking the same language.
Yeah. If you've got 4 children, there's a pretty good chance that's going to happen anyway, isn't there?
Absolutely. So one of my favourite parts, I know there's a lot of inaccuracies in The Crown, but one of my favourite parts of The Crown, I think it's season 3, and it starts at the beginning, and Prince Philip is calling out for Sweetie. And he's going, Sweetie, Sweetie, and it's going all over Buckingham Palace, like, Sweetie, Sweetie, and all the courtiers are getting like hot under the collar, thinking, why is the Duke like calling for Sweetie? Who's Sweetie? And the Michael Adine, I think it is, the private secretary, goes into the Queen, who's sat at her desk with a pen writing away, and he goes, Your Majesty, because they can all hear this, and she went, No. She went, I'm Cabbage, oh darling, Sweetie's someone else. Oh, it's so funny. And it's Princess Anne that he's calling for.
Oh, there's some anecdotes I've heard about Princess Anne, but they're not for this time.
Well, he said about Princess Anne, I think when she was an Olympian, and obviously she's into horses and has been all her life. He said, you know what, Princess Anne, he went, who doesn't fart or eat oats, she's not interested.
There you go. But she just like, she's not disrespectful. So when I say she doesn't care, I don't mean it like that. She's just like, no. Like that story when someone tried to kidnap her. Did you hear that one?
Yeah. Just like that. What was he said again?
Rude words though, so quite strong rude words. So
yeah, was it he said get out of the car or come with me or whatever, and she went, I don't bloody think so.
And no, she went, I'd like to see you insert word that begins with F. Try. And I think at that point the bloke was just like, I don't know what I'm meant to do now. So that was it. And then all the heavies came along and kind of jumped in and yanked him out and probably kicked his head in, because it was like several years ago when you could do stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so that was the thing. I like, can come and get out. I don't bloody think so.
Yeah, brilliant.
Not flipping lightly.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm your bike pal.
Obviously, once Charles becomes the heir apparent, he then becomes he then has an heir himself. So I think because we tend to look at periods of history further back, and the succession is a lot more like vital, and it still is, but it's sort of a bit softer around the edges. And
yeah,
it's acceptable now to have a female ruler, and on and on and on it goes. Then of course you have a different dynamic again to a relationship once you've gone on that extra generation. And a lot of people have very, very different opinions on Diana, which again is nothing to do with this conversation. I only mention it in the sense that you do seem to sense a little bit of a shift because of the way initially that Diana did interact with her children, perhaps was seen more than was traditional. And she take them to Alton Towers, and she did, and obviously Charles is in that situation. He's not like one parent and another parent. So I don't know, it makes you sort of wonder what Philip felt about the way the royal, like his children, was starting to have children of their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how they were bringing them up. But then as I'm saying this, I'm thinking he very possibly didn't have a say in any of it anyway. If it was 2 generations on,
Yeah.
like his son immediately, but his children again, how much, you know, he often felt, and we talked just now about how he was maybe in the background a little bit sometimes. Maybe he was more of an observer, or was he by that point allowed to kind of get into the nitty gritty, the Duke of Edinburgh with his grandchildren a little bit more? That may be an impossible to answer question.
Yeah.
Those, aren't I?
They all seem to be incredibly fond of him. I think I remember it was either Princess, I think it might have been Princess Eugenie, and she, I think it might have been his 90th birthday or another significant birthday that he was having. And she was talking about him on a documentary that they were doing to commemorate his birthday, whichever birthday it was. And at one point she was talking about the experiences that she'd had with her grandfather. And I think they were starting to talk about horses or carriage driving or something. And she actually got quite choked up at one point. And she said, oh, I think it kind of took her a little bit of a surprise as well. She went, oh, Grandpa. And she kind of composed herself again and then carried on. And I thought, well, you know, that it was a kind of spontaneous moment.
Yeah.
That there was clearly something between them that was
maybe
that kind of,
he wasn't the monarch facilitated some of those relationships.
Maybe, and maybe just really genuinely did love children, because some people do, don't they? And they just,
and not,
they're just great with them.
Off doing as many things as the Queen did, you know, in terms of official duties and the boxes and things, meant that he could enjoy the relationships with the little ones and had a little more time for them, maybe.
I think there's a difference as well if you look at it. I mean, obviously there's a big age gap between Princess Anne and then, I mean, Princess Anne was born in 1949 and then Prince Andrew was born in 1960. So there's a big age gap between the two of them. So it's almost, so it's almost like they've had two children and then another 2 children, and there's this big age gap in the middle. So I don't know if the Queen is maybe more settled into a role by the time the other children come along, and she does, you know, we're all a bit older and, you know, maybe being a bit strict. I mean, I suppose when you get to child number 4, you're just going to let them throw knives at one another.
Yeah, my dad was a bit like that. Which one's this one? It was like, whatever I did, the others would have already done it. So
exactly, you know. So you just go out into the street when it's dinner time, you go, how many have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4. But it doesn't matter whose children they are, right? You in.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe it was a different dynamic. I think there were, it's been quite, I think everybody's, and Prince Charles has certainly been very open about it, that the experience that Prince Philip had at Gordonston, he felt that was the making of him. Okay. Whereas Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, hated it. He loathed it because he was just a very different character. He said it was coldits and kilts. Hence the fact that both his sons, both Prince William and Prince Harry, went to Eton. I don't think there was ever going to be any indication that the pair of them were gonna go to Gordonston. Even, I mean, the different characters, they might have absolutely excelled at that because they're both quite physical guys.
It wasn't going to be forced on them, and
it wasn't going to be. It wasn't. They both went to Eton, which was, you know, very close to. Well, it's obviously just down the road from Windsor Castle. You can see Granny's house from your window.
Yeah. Give her away down there. No, I mean, it is like stone's throw, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's quite funny that Paul Burrell in his book. Please don't judge me for reading Paul Burrell's book.
Oh, Paul Burrell! I'd forgotten about Paul Burrell.
But he said that when he was in the employment of Diana, Princess of Wales, that William and Harry, when they got the money, they would call a £20 note that's purple, they would call it a purple granny.
Oh.
And a brown granny was a tenner. Yeah. So a purple granny and a
That's what I'm calling it from now on. That's it now. That's what I'm calling it.
A brown granny, that's hilarious.
So a lot of the things, so from what my perception of this, which of course might be wrong, is that because we've talked about how he maybe felt a little bit to the side, you know, he wasn't as in his career, he needed to find something perhaps to, because you can't just like be a member of the royal family and sort of sit about and wait for something to happen. So he really embraced finding challenges and supporting good causes and using the sort of time and influence he had, because he had influence thrust upon him, whether he wanted it or not, to try and develop programs and leave legacies and help people. So that time that he could have like sort of wasted isn't the right word, but well, you know, I've lost my career, you know, this and that has happened. He was like, right, I need to use this time productively. Now, obviously, spending time with his family is productive in itself, but this is where we start to see, I mean, between him and like the Queen before she passed away, was nominally, you know, stood for hundreds of charities, didn't she?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The most
800 or something Prince Philip has been involved in the 7 decades that he was involved. So, you know, that's a lot.
A colossal amount of fundraising and research and programs and understanding and giving and the most famous one, of course, I would imagine that people have heard of, is the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, which is definitely a legacy, because, you know, even as he got older, perhaps he was less active, and then he retired, obviously, from public life a few years ago, because, as you say, you know, he was an older man, and, you know, you get to the point where I think maybe your health declined, but also I just sometimes look at them and think, him and Her Majesty, and think, but you've just had enough, really.
Nice cup of tea and
I'd say, you know, you work so hard, you've done this all your life, but just every now and again you must just think, I just like want to watch Loose Women and have a cup of tea. I'm sure they would watch Loose Women and have a cup of tea, but you know, this real sort of consistent, constant, you know, working every day, and you know, so now the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, are you able to tell us a little bit about that?
I think that I didn't do any of it when I was at school, and so I've never been involved in it personally. I have had friends whose children have done it. It seems to me, from reading and watching what they've been saying the last few days, that when Prince Philip went to Gordonstoun, the guy who was a refugee, who was an exiled Jew who kind of set up the school, his idea was that Kurt Hand, that not everybody was going to be an academic genius. And so it was incumbent on educators to find that thing in every child that made them a success or gave them that sense of success. So so the curriculum was very broad, so that it included something that, you know, most people could find their thing.
Yeah.
And I think this seems to be, from what I can gather, the inspiration for the Duke of Edinburgh Award, to give children or young people that idea that if you could succeed at one thing that was challenging, then that might plant the seeds in you to say, okay, so, you know, okay, I'm not going to get, you know, 3 A levels at A and get a first from Oxford or whatever, but, you know, I'm brilliant at golf, or I'm amazing at you know, orienteering, or I've volunteered and given service and done this. And I think this is the idea behind and there's so many people that have been on today and yesterday who've been through it and said, you know, absolutely, this, I maybe wasn't that good at, you know, interacting with people, and I wasn't that popular at school, and I found these relationships really difficult. And then I was out in the wilderness with like 10 other kids, and it was like, now we just have to get on with it, and came back a different person. So I think this seems to be in it. There's a lot of people have said that apparently it's very difficult to get the gold award.
Oh, I'd drown in dream or something. I'd be absolutely amazed whatsoever.
Yeah, so there's the bronze, and then there's the silver, and then there's the gold, and it's incredibly difficult to get the gold one. You have to really give it your all. And so Prince Philip would always give out the gold awards himself up until he retired. So if you got the gold award, you knew you were in for, you would get invited to Holyrood or Hillsborough or to Buckingham Palace to be given the award by Prince Philip.
Oh, you know when you wish you'd met someone.
I know. Oh, God knows what I would have said. I
Pretty
don't know,
much
you
like,
can't speak to me like that.
it's like really tongue-tied or something. No, you can, let's have a game of croquet.
Yeah,
Dirty
filthy.
croquet. Dirty croquet.
Well, it was funny. Do you know they've used this expression the last few days. I've heard them say that sometimes when people meet members of the royal family, and as it's the same with celebrities as well, it's like watching a movie where there are pictures but there's no sound. So quite often, there'll be this kind of buzz of anticipation as the, whoever it is, whether it be the Queen or the Duke of Edinburgh, moves along the line, and you, oh, it's me next, kind of thing. Yeah, and then they say something, you're like,
hi. Yeah.
oh. And they're saying that quite often this is where this thing about the gaffes would come in, because he would try to disarm people.
Yeah.
And then
like my dad would do.
Yeah. And I remember saying this to some participants in a class years ago. I was saying, okay, nobody's saying that. He has said some things that are like, really? You can't say that.
Did you realise you said that out loud?
Yeah. I think if I had met that many people in my life and had to talk to that many people, I would have probably made a million times more mistakes and gaffes. And I mean, I could make a gaff teaching 10 people, a step class.
Yeah.
Never mind,
So, yeah, I mean, it's astounding the amount of people he must have met in his lifetime.
Yeah.
When you reflect
hundreds of thousands.
Incredible.
So, I know.
One thing I noticed, I forget the exact date, but maybe about 3 or 4-ish years ago, he retired from public life, didn't he?
Yeah, 2017.
And I think it was obvious to people that his health was in decline. He was spending time in hospital. He wasn't at as many events, and even small. I'm not just talking about like, the royal tournament and things like that. And I'm talking about like even some family church services and smaller celebrations and things. He wouldn't be there, and he didn't look a well man sometimes. And it often struck me, as I know with a lot of the official photos and events and things, obviously a lot of members of the royal family. Anne doesn't tend to sort of put herself out, and the Wessexes have been Edward and Sophie, isn't it? The Wessexes, yeah, they've been in a lot, and I really like them. They've been in the public eye, and I saw a photo of him today. He's grown into a much more handsome man than a young man. I was like, oh, she's done well for herself there.
All right there, Hen.
But once, obviously the Queen was then doing a lot of the appearances on her own that she may have had him accompany her with, and she looked oddly lonely without him, as professional and polite as she always was. Even then, it's almost like there's a draft down this side. And so now again, how that must be. But people speculate on their marriage, and people always do. This doesn't matter who you are, but they were together for such a long time, and they saw so many things and went through so many things, and he must have just been an enormous support. And she's commented on that, hasn't she, in the past?
Yes, she has. Yeah,
I'm sure she will again, because people will be expecting her to make statements and all this type of stuff that I'm sure she doesn't want to do right now, but she will in time, I'm sure. And she has commented in the past on how much of a rock he has been to her, and I have no doubt that she entirely appreciated the fact that he did have to take those steps back from his own life to support her. And it's hard to imagine the space that he's left, but certainly he's always been by her side, either literally or emotionally, over all that time. And it was sad, I think, when he stepped back. We all understand that he needed to do that, and it was a decision that would have been taken lightly or even in a short space of time. So, and occasionally we would see him, but it was just, even then, she must have missed his presence sometimes. Even
sure she does.
Oh God, I've got to go and open another museum.
Another supermarket. Oh, God. It was a commentary
in the back of the Bentley and have a laugh about it. Probably
There was a
texting him. Oh,
commentator
today I got
yesterday.
rained on. Had to go in a really awful toilet. Texting him in the back of the car.
There was a commentator yesterday was making a comment about the same thing, and what he was saying was shortly after he'd retired, she had gone to a service at Westminster Abbey, and she was walking up a bit like when your partner isn't in the bed with you, like you still. Well, I don't know about me. I always stay in the same side of the bed regardless of whether my husband's there. Like a Labrador.
Yes, yes, like a toddler who sleeps like a starfish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this commentator was saying that when I looked at it, what I noticed was she was still walking on her side. Her Majesty was still walking on her side, as if the Duke would have been beside her, which clearly wasn't, because he had retired by that point. I also think there's this, and I suppose it goes back to the whole marriage thing and having that relationship with somebody, that closeness, is that when you're in the Queen's, and Queen Victoria had this as well, when you're in that position where you have, probably Victoria more so, you have complete deference from everyone who's around you. And perhaps the only person who can tell you what is really happening is the person who has seen you at the most vulnerable, the slippers on and the rollers and the
Queen never looks like that. She always looks immaculate.
Yeah, taking her nightie off, or doing whatever she's doing, all the human things that couples have to share because they live in such close proximity. So when Albert died, Victoria said, "Oh dear, no one to call me Victoria anymore," because her mother had gone and so had Albert, and there was other people who called her Victoria. And so she got away with a lot of behaviour after that, because simply there just wasn't anyone to say, "Do you know what?
Yeah,
that's not on." No, because that was her spouse. And I think if anyone's going to tell you the truth, Prince Philip was that kind of character who would tell you the truth, maybe regardless of what relationship you had.
Definitely would have told her the truth.
Yeah, and maybe in that position, you do need someone who's going to go, "I know you're the big noise here, but I'm here to tell you that's not right."
Sometimes as well, you want to, I know, like, we have a constitutional monarchy, and it's all very much, you mentioned earlier about, she's never been in a position for making legislation and so forth, but there's still the world's looking at you, and there must have been times when she must have thought, how am I going to react to someone controversial coming over, or something that's happened within my family that's being well publicized, or there's an event happening and I want to make sure that I come across in the best way to support the people that are suffering at this time. And you must just need someone sometimes to go, tell me honestly, if I say this, is this sensitive? Am I going to come across as an idiot? Or what would you do? Would you think this is the right thing to say? Or even, I've got to go and meet this person now, and they're the biggest asshat I've ever come across in my own life. Can we just have a nod that means, like, if I do, like, oh right, that means please come and rescue me, because otherwise I'll end up in the tower.
Yeah, I'm going to lock myself up in my own tower.
Either I'll be dragged off, or I'll take myself, one or the other. And I did hear this thing, and I don't know how it's true, is that she carries her hand, because being the generation she had, she still uses the same types of handbags and things, and very much like my nan was a similar sort of age, with the clasp and the over the arm and that type of style. And if she moves, if she does different things with her handbag, I don't know how this is.
I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems to be an urban legend.
Get me out of here, I can't cope with this anymore.
I won't tell you, me and my husband have had numerous discussions about what the Queen keeps in her handbag, right? And
definitely a mobile phone these days,
probably. But
would you allowed a mobile phone? You are allowed a mobile phone with your recliner. I bet. Lipstick.
Apparently, she puts money for church in the bag, so she always has a little something to put in the plate. My husband's theory is that she has some sorts of intimate medicine in there, just in case.
Yes, you never know when you might need a paracetamol.
Well, that's not really what I meant, but I'll let your imagination run wild with it.
Just whatever you might require at the time.
Whatever you might require. I mean, there's a lot of sitting down. Who knows what you might
Ah,
what you might need, right? That's that's what she's got in her handbag.
plasters.
Yeah, sweeties. I mean, there's a lovely scene in the King's Speech. I don't know if you've seen it,
Oh, a long
where
time ago.
the Queen Mother, who's played by Helena Bonham Carter, is sitting outside the oh goodness, I forget the doctor's name. He's sitting outside the office of the speech therapist, and a little boy comes out, and she kind of like, and she's got her handbag and the hat and the gloves and everything, and the boy sits down, and she says to him, she said, "Would you like a sweetie?" I thought, oh, that's lovely.
Oh,
I love the idea that the
yeah.
Queen Mother would have
There's
sweeties.
humbugs or not something nice in there, isn't it?
Yeah, in our bag, just in case you met a small child to go.
Oh, and maybe a pair of tights.
When I worked for British Midlands, you always had to have a spare pair of tights in your bag all the time.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't get away with this now, and I digress a little bit, but they used to have in the contract, right, that if they gave you a uniform and it didn't fit appropriately for any reason, you were to take remedial action immediately.
Oh.
And that, in terms of the airline industry them years ago, was called a fat chat.
Wow.
There you go.
You see,
something you didn't know.
This is what shapewear is for.
Not to make you look like or feel like sausages.
Well, no, lockdown has not been kind.
Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Yes, no, but it's all these interesting little things. Yes. I would. There is inevitably now. I mean, there's already documentaries out and things already, because it almost. Do you know what I was just about to say? It almost feels like people have been sat around waiting. Do you know what? I'm sure they have, because that's what people are like. And obviously, he was an elderly man, and he had a lot of ill health. And although this is very sad, it wasn't a massive surprise. I think unfortunately it was in the back of everybody's minds that the Duke was unwell. But there will be a lot of articles, documentaries, and I'm sure books of varying qualities coming out over the course of this next few weeks and months. And he's said, there were two people that I really would like to meet in the British royal family. One was him, and the other one, with no offense to anybody else, and Princess Anne. And I just, it's a man I would like to find out a lot more about. And I hope that we all get the opportunity to do that. And certainly Charles Brandreth, who you mentioned earlier, who wrote the book that you were showing us, and they were very good friends. He's a terrific writer, and
yeah, he's very good.
A really nice chap as well. He's written all sorts of things, hasn't he? And so I think that will be one for the list once I've finished writing about this.
Simon, he was actually saying something really good today. He was on the breakfast show this morning, and he was talking to Charlie on the BBC. And Charles Brandreth said when he was standing for Parliament, and he said, "Oh, I don't know." He's talking to the Duke, saying, "I don't know if I can do this, and all these people I've got to meet, and I won't remember them and the names and all these different things." And the Duke said, "Well, what I do," he said, "is when I meet someone, I always say to them, 'What are you doing these days?'" And he said it means that if I do know them, they'll just go, "Oh, well, I'm doing da, 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 da," and away they'll go. And if I don't know them, it makes it sound like, "Oh, you were doing something, and now you might be doing something else."
And I'm interested.
Yeah. So there you go. That was one of his tricks of the trade. But going back to what you were saying about the whole rehearsal thing. So all the senior members of the royal family do have a funeral plan in place.
Right.
So they're all named after bridges. So Prince Charles's Menai Bridge, which is, I think, is that the bridge that goes from, I think it's a Welsh bridge.
Oh, I have my geography's appalling, don't
I? Yeah. The Queen Mother's was the Tay Bridge, because that's up in the north of Scotland, and of course that's where her family home grounds was. The Queen is London Bridge, and the Duke of Edinburgh was the Forth Bridge, because the Forth Bridge is what connects the Kingdom of Fife to Lothian, where Edinburgh is.
Okay.
So there's this whole plan that's rehearsed with the BBC and now the Press Association, that if whoever at the palace is to ring the BBC, whoever's in charge of the BBC, London Bridge is down, that then starts that process. So that's why it looks so slick over the few days. Like you notice, like we all seen the same picture of the Duke, you know, Princess Anne and Prince Charles and Andrew and Edward all gave interviews, kind of retrospective ones, like they were talking like their father had already passed away.
Wow.
And I was thinking, oh, like, I wonder if, and Princess Anne had a black outfit on. So there's a very well-rehearsed protocol that happens when a senior member of the royal family dies, which is why when Diana, Princess of Wales, died, it threw the whole thing into a conundrum, because there was no, she no longer had that. So they had to go along with the Queen Mother's funeral plan was called the Taybridge. So they based it loosely around that. So it is a very well-rehearsed process.
Wow.
I know. Scary, but I know. Blimey.
Thank you so much. It's lots of, despite obviously this being a sad time, still lots of smiles and lots of knowledge, and lots of people have been sort of sharing their sort of happy stories, and you know, the way that they appreciate what he did in his life in terms of the charities and the good causes that he stood for religiously, and did so much good for over years and decades in many cases. And of course the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, which which has been so advantageous to so many children in different circumstances. So he definitely leaves strong legacies in those, and obviously in his family, and he will be very much missed by a huge number of people. He's not somebody you can replace, even if you wanted to, which nobody does, but you couldn't even if you wanted to.
No.
And I'm pleased to see so much support coming out for the Queen, and of course the rest of the family, and lots of very respectful commemorations and wishes and so forth. And there is an online book of remembrance, isn't there?
Yeah, there's like an online condolence book.
Yes,
I think you're right. It's
and so people can sign.
People can do that. It's I think it's one of those things. It's very sad for Her Majesty and the family, you know, to have someone who's been such a cornerstone of your family and your life for all of those years. It's important to remember he had a very, very long and full life, and he also did a lot of, like you said, he made a massive difference. He could cut through, you know, politics and politicians and all of that bureaucracy and go straight to the heart of. David Attenborough said it earlier on, he knew exactly where to go. If he needed to lobby for something, he knew exactly how to cut through the tape and get straight in there. And me personally, you know what a big fan of Prince Albert I am. I can't give him personally, not that I knew either man, but I can't give him any more of a compliment personally than his great-great-grandfather would have been immensely proud. I think these two women, Victoria and Queen Elizabeth, could not have made the impact in their reigns that they had if they hadn't had these two men absolutely 100% in their corner, probably calling them out when they needed to be called out, and supporting them to say, you know, on the days where you're, oh, I can't, like the ass hat day, I can't, you know, if I have to speak to this Prime Minister one more time, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of person that would take that information to the grave with them.
Yeah.
So that's my.
Before we were emotional.
I know.
There were tears yesterday.
Oh, there were.
So thank you to everybody who has taken the time to watch this. We hope you've enjoyed it. I really, really have. This may very well be a topic that we could revisit again and again and again, and to speak about Her Majesty the Queen as well, for sure, because another incredible life. I mean, but in the interim, I think we all recognise certainly what the Duke did in his years, and he will not be forgotten. He cannot be forgotten. But certainly all our best wishes and condolences to the royal family at this time, and thank you, sir, for everything that you did for us. And we have enjoyed being observers of your life over the years. And yes, yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best person to give a real you know, oh no, I'm sorry. Don't, because you'll make me go as well.
I know, it's sad. It's sad.
Yeah, it is. But I'm definitely looking out for that book you've recommended, and I will take some time. This one here, look, everybody, Philip and Elizabeth. What a wonderful picture. They were quite a
I know.
couple, weren't they?
Oh, very, very. And at the time they were, you know, it was the Charles and Diana, the Harry and Meghan of their day. You know, everybody, 1 million people turned out on the streets of Sydney to see the Queen. It was, you know, everywhere they went, it was, you know, they were this huge amount of deference. And, you know, I think she said it right, the Queen, when she said, you know, the country and other countries in his family owe him a greater debt than he would ever accept or ever acknowledge. And maybe that is the sign of somebody great, is that they do it because it's the right thing to do, not because they want to be in the spotlight, to be, you know, to receive plaudits.
Well, greatest respect to everybody concerned. If you have any questions, Gayle was definitely, obviously, the best person to ask. You can find her at British Sovereigns and Royals, which we mentioned earlier on as well, and find her there anyway, because it's worth doing. And there are a lot of tributes to him on your page as well, aren't there? And if you follow any royal groups of any period, in fact, not just more modern royalty, you will find tributes to Prince Philip in all of those groups. So and some wonderful photographs and films and memories and things like that. So thank you all so much for joining us. I really hope you've had something out of this conversation and you've learned some wonderful stuff. And if you're feeling obviously emotional at this time, know that there are many of us with you, and there will be lots to share, I think, lots to share over the next few days, weeks and months, that we can all enjoy and celebrate in the life of this gentleman who is sadly no longer with us. So I think I'm just making it worse for Gayle now. So
Stop.
So on this note, please take care, everybody. Do look after yourselves. Keep enjoying history. We absolutely love it. Come and find us wherever you can, because we'll talk about it all day and all night. We both said to our other halves, we'll be about half an hour, and it's been about 2 hours since we first logged on. So I think we're going to have to go and do some apologising now.
Grovel.
Yeah, but it's good.
Oh yes, very good.
They're very tolerant, aren't they?
Yes, they are. These are, you know, to me, I don't need to kiss any more frogs. I have found my prince.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody. Please take care, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.